Okay, well, it looks like we have everybody in attendance now. So we're going to start with a short introductory PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll have a practical demonstration of the product. So welcome to Allclear 2013, and we're just going to kind of run through sort of the initial basics of the tool. So access to the tool is just like any other sort of desktop application that you would have in your Windows programs. And then sort of upon connecting to the application, you have sort of like a series of welcome screens where you can sort of select for some pre-built templates or commence from a blank sheet to create your own diagrams. So we're just going to kind of go through the tool sets to explain some of these key features of the product. Okay, so just to sort of highlight those summary items that are accessible from the front screen, and then sort of from the starting point, the product is basically split into three views. So we have the diagrammer for the workflow, the text chart, and then we also use some drag and drop tools for quick creation on some key steps of the process. So that basically looks like this. So the left-hand side of the text editor, obviously we can simply use the syntax and text statements to generate the workflow. And then on the diagrammer palettes, we can take things like clusters and what-if case scenarios, and we can just simply drag and drop those tool sets into the diagram to obviously get the structure created nice and quickly. So for getting started, one of the things that we do recommend upon purchasing the product is to go through the setup for all of the features in the toolset palettes. So some of these key features from your options menu will be to sort of set up the default sort of your preferred fonts, point sizes, setting of the diagram definitions, things like the box styles, key attributes, things that you want to sort of show. So that'll be like the syntax used in the text editor, whether you want that syntax to be shown on the diagram or hidden away. So it's always best to kind of go through this toolbox to kind of get the key setup that you require. So you just apply that once to the application, so then you don't kind of have to sort of make any modifications on a diagram by diagram basis. And then one of the final functions is kind of customizing sort of the top set ribbon for quick access icons. Okay, so for the basic diagram, so just sort of highlighting on the three key functions there. Then we can zoom in onto that aspect. So we basically sort of start with sort of like a head statement for our starting point. Then we use various syntax like the period, full stop, question mark and colons syntax that will kind of generate and build the structure of the process workflow. So the text editor is really good for sort of like laying down the skeletal structure and then using sort of like the tool sets within Allclear to kind of sort of like add images, add colors, change sort of like the properties of the workflow as you begin to sort of develop that requirement. And then sort of for more complex items, you can use the diagrammer to simply sort of like click, select and drag and drop into the preferred location of your diagram. So the ribbon menus is very similar to Microsoft Office. So you've got very much an identical interface, and sort of just kind of clicking through some of the ribbon tool sets, we can quickly see some of the features and functions available to us in the Allclear product. Okay, so that sort of finishes up with the initial overview from the presentation. And now we can move to the main product set. So this is sort of like Allclear, sort of starting from a blank page to create our diagram. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to sort of just use a very sort of basic example of things that we do day to day, which is going to be sort of clearing a room and sort of redecorating it, but basically sort of outlining those instruction steps using the workflow tools given to us within the Allclear product. So the first thing that I'm going to do for my my process is obviously to sort of define a title. So I simply sort of type in my text, hit the return key, and then obviously we have our title stated. So the next thing I'm going to do is obviously give it the head statement, which is basically the top line position for my process, and I'm going to work through the key steps. So the first step for preparing the room would be to sort of clear the room of any furniture. And to close that, I'm going to use the period full stop to kind of close that box step together. So what I'm going to do for my diagram, I kind of want to sort of bring in some central alignment. Okay, so if I just sort of zoom in there a second, and I can use the centering tool to bring that into the middle of the screen. Then we kind of move on to step 2 with the next part of our instruction. Okay, and then using the period full stop, again, we can return that. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to want some options next. So I'm going to use a slightly different syntax with a colon that will then give me 3 default options. And then again, sort of on those decision points, we obviously use color decision highlighters as we work through the process. Now, with the default text that's given, I can simply just sort of overtype that text with my required selectors. And then to kind of update that, I can just kind of click into the space of the diagram, and then we can kind of see that that text has obviously changed to what's been given. If I wanted an additional option, I could simply follow suit and add an extra item to that definition. So we'll kind of work through the rest of the structure, and then we'll kind of lead into some of the sort of extended functions of the tool. So to kind of bring all of those options into alignment, I'll sort of use the backspace, and now I'm going to actually use a decision point. Okay. So for our decision points, I'm going to use a question mark this time. So what that question mark does, it kind of gives me the yes/no routing, and obviously sort of we use sort of like the red color to sort of like indicate that that what-if scenario. So I'm going to start on the no selection. So with the no selection, it obviously makes sense to fill the steamer with some water. Now what I need to do now is I kind of need to bring that box section back into the loop, because obviously once it's been filled with water, we're then going to route down through the S branch. So what I can do now is I can select that box, then holding down the shift key I can select the obviously the connect back to. And what Allclear automatically does, it automatically takes me to the formatter within my ribbon menu, and I can select from the Create Go-To palette and make my line selection. So by default, it's kind of sort of like rerouted it back into the top, but I want to sort of change my line positioning. So what I can do now, I can quickly sort of click on the line selector, and then use the connection points. So I then got the sort of the connection points palette. So for my incoming lines, I'm going to say, okay, well I want it to kind of route into that side of the diagram. Okay, maybe I might sort of position it slightly higher. So again, we've got sort of various options that we can look to kind of get the you know, the customization that we require. So the nice thing with these palette properties is that we don't need to manually try and drag and move around with the cursor and kind of create difficulties for ourselves. Everything can be sort of automated and formatted with these tool sets. It kind of makes life a lot easier. Okay, so that's that in place, and then we can see here that our text editor has updated itself with the necessary information. So the next bit is I want to kind of carry on the S branch. So I've got a couple of options. I can either sort of come back into the text editor itself, and I can update the text here. Alternatively, you can actually double click into the box, and you can update the text here as well. So again, there's a couple of options available to you in terms of sort of your preferences for using the tool sets. So we can just kind of follow these final instructions. on a linear pattern. Okay, so we've now sort of completed the basic structure of that first part of the instruction. So after the room preparation, the next part of the instruction is kind of sort of getting into the decoration of the room. So like with any sort of like workflow process that's quite a lengthy set of instructions, it's far easier to kind of break those down into bite-sized pieces. So the facility that we have for that within the Allclear tool is to actually use layering for our instructions. So the first thing I can do, I can kind of modify my layer tab, and I can sort of highlight that as the room prep. And the next thing I'm going to do is create my second set of workflow instructions using a secondary layer. So I can simply right click onto that option, call that final prep, and decorate to finish. So very, very similar to sort of like additional sheets that you would have in Excel. Okay, so we've got two clear separations between the two. So again, I can sort of add on a final title. Okay, and then at the end of the structure, I will sort of come back and sort of apply the various formatting to this. So the thing that I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to start with a decision point. So what I can do again is like before, is select the head statement, and rather than using the text now, I'm going to kind of come on to the diagrammer. So on the diagrammer, I can use these various sort of options from the palette. So say, for example, if I was to kind of drag and drop that onto the screen, and then just use my centering tool to align that. Now that's one particular style. So if you choose a particular style, the sort of human nature is, okay, well I'm going to kind of grab a box and I can start moving around, which you can see I can do that quite easily. But one of the things that we do have that makes life a lot easier is to kind of come onto our formatting tools and bring up the clustering palette. Okay, so just reselect that. Okay, so now I've got the choice selections, and I can kind of go through in just a couple of clicks and quickly change that to the requirement. Okay, so we've got the default text there. That's obviously dropped that on as part of it. So I can kind of get rid of that one and just bring that back up. So for the actual text itself, I'm just going to sort of use the text editor and just put in what I want to say. Okay. And then just come down to the next steps on the yes and the no branch. Okay, so like before, we'll start with the no option. Okay, and then we obviously need to kind of bring this back into the alignment. So sort of select the box there, hold the shift key back to the root, use the alignment, and I can just use the cursor key just to kind of bring that down a bit to get it to where I want to be. So we can kind of come back to the yes branch now. So what I'm going to do on the yes branch is I'm going to sort of start that with a further decision point. Okay, so instead of using the period full stop, I'm now going to sort of change that to the colon, and then that routes down those options for me. Okay, let's just bring that back across so you can see the screen nicely. And then we can just kind of update those items now. So again, I'm not the world's quickest typist, but you can see that I can kind of create these diagrams really, really quickly without sort of having to draw everything out. So it kind of does make life nice and easy. So I'm going to kind of bring this down onto some linear routing now. Okay, and just use the full stop period again. Okay, bring those down, and I've got one further decision point to complete this. Okay, so again, using our question mark. So again, we can sort of get the structure together nice and easy. So again, if I start with the no option and just put repeat, come back into the diagram. Also, I want to loop that back together, so exactly the same as before, and get these structures built nice and quickly. Come back onto our yes branch. Okay, and I'll say follow that down through the stages. Okay, so we're now sort of like on the yes branch, sort of now ready to kind of paint the walls. So obviously a few more final decisions here, and then we can sort of show some of the advanced formatting and joining the two steps of the instructions together for the completion of our workflows. Okay, so we can just put some options in now. Okay, so what I can do now is I can sort of use some of the formatting to kind of make those options a bit more obvious. So I can kind of change it to the respective decisions there. So I'm just kind of using this fill palette. Okay, so again, using sort of like the colours and the formatters, we can kind of sort of, make some emphasis to what we're doing. So likewise, I can also hold down the cursor and just kind of drag out across those boxes, come onto the formatting, bring up the shapes tool, and sort of, from our shapes palette, is pick an appropriate shape for those items. Then I can sort of come back into the text editor. Okay, so that bit there, obviously I've sort of followed that instruction under that one colour, but really that instruction applies to all three of those colours. So if you sort of make that kind of error, simply come up to the text, use the backspace, and bring that sort of back into the alignment to kind of rejoin that statement to all three of those choice options. Okay, so once we sort of have done that, we're pretty much at the end of this final instruction. Okay, so what we need to do now, we actually kind of need to join the instruction from the first workflow into step 2 of the final preparation workflow. So the easiest way to do that with the Allclear tool is that we come to the decision point. Okay, so we select that box. Then simply using a right-click function, we can bring up this pop-up menu, and then we can go to the tools, the links, and we can do the link to. Okay, so the link to now brings me up a little palette of controls here, so I can kind of make connections to various steps either within the current process or a step within the secondary layer instruction. So I'm going to change that to layer 2, and I want to sort of connect that to the starting point. But again, you could sort of make a connection sort of midpoint in your process, depending upon what those instructions are. So I'm going to take it from the top, and I've just obviously got to give it a text reference. So simply call that go to next step. And I can also make that a two-way link. So if you've got some process that goes off to a sub-level of instruction, and then once you've reviewed that, you would want to kind of come back to the main instruction, we have an option here to make that a two-way connect. Okay, so what I'll do now is just kind of to bring all of this together, I'm going to kind of switch off the text editor now. So down the bottom side of the screen, we've got some extended functionality, so I can just put it into the diagram view. I'm also going to get rid of the background grid. So the background grid is kind of quite useful if you want to kind of select a box and you do want to do some manual maneuvering on the screen. Then the grid is quite handy for doing that sort of placements with the snap to grid feature. So I'm going to kind of just go to my view now, and I'm going to switch off those grid lines. And then some of the other things I'm also going to do, I'm just going to come onto my box attributes, and I'm going to kind of turn off some of the syntax as well. So again, now we can just see a plain diagram. So we come back to the first layer, and I'll just switch off the grid lines for that one and leave the rest of it as is. So if I come down the bottom to our workflow, and the next thing is we want to connect to the next step, so that immediately then takes me into the second part of the workflow. Now, some of the extended functions that we can have here, so maybe, for example, I want to put some additional comments on this choice criteria. So what we can do, we can basically add like electronic post-it notes to various parts of our workflow. So by selecting our appropriate box, we're on the formatter, so we can come up to our notes, and then we've got our note palette, and again we can kind of sort of like format the style. So please refer to vendors instructions and usage policy. Okay, so I can apply that. So that actually then kind of gives us sort of like a little pop-up to that step. So again, you don't have to put all of that information into your workflow. You can kind of add these little post-it notes throughout to kind of give further instruction. One of the other things that we also might like to do, we might want to maybe add some graphics to our workflow as well, just as kind of, kind of polishing off the skeletal structure once that's complete. So maybe sort of like within some of these areas, I might want to sort of have some supplementary images. So I can simply come onto the insert now, select my sort of picture icon, just come into this folder, and I can grab that image of the steamer. So what we can do now is obviously we can just kind of format it to just obviously a baseline image on the screen. Now, one of the things that's also useful, particularly if I want to move my diagram, so if I move my diagram over to the right slightly, the image stays where it is. So if you want to kind of connect images or free drawing boxes to your workflow, then you can just by using a dab of glue. So to use a dab of glue, simply select the item, it comes up on the formatter, select the glue, so obviously I can't glue anything into the free space, but I can kind of connect it to here and pin that together. So when I move my diagram, you can see that the image moves in line with that requirement. Okay, so jumping on to the second step, so again if I come down for the workflow, just use that layer connectoring. In addition to kind of static images, one of the other things that I could also do is I could actually change a box step into a JPEG image. So slightly different this time. We don't sort of come up to the insert image function here. This is one of our right-click functions within the tool. And we simply come onto the tools and pictures and insert the picture. So now I can kind of grab this appropriate image and drop that on. So what I can do now to kind of format that, so again I can just use the grab bars to space that out, and then if I want to I can kind of click into the text editor, maybe just to kind of emphasize that text. I'm going to bring up the point size, put a bit of bold on that, maybe sort of put it into red. Okay, just move that down a little bit. And just kind of get it to where you need to be. So then the final thing that I can also do here is just sort of making sure that there's no lines attached to that as well. Okay, so that's sort of some of the key functions that you can use within the Allclear tool. One of the other items that's quite useful is that you might want to actually place instruction to a written document. Okay, so if I close that presentation, okay, and I'll see, say for example, on this step, I want to connect to that presentation document from earlier. I can now go to our attachments, okay, and I can add an attachment. So the attachments give you quite a few options. So you've got standard documents. You could go to another application. You could go to a URL web page, intranet page, or link to a document inside our sort of Progress Enterprise document management system that we do. Or if it's just a document on the desktop, then select the top option. So, okay, I've got mine pre-selected to ACD file, so I just need to change that. And then I've got access to all my files. Okay. And I can just give it a description there. Apply that, and then we get a slightly different connector. So now I can click on that connector, and I can actually then jump to that document as part of the workflow. So the nice thing with these connected tools, the Allclear interface provides sort of your users a nice graphical interface to, you know, what is the instruction, what are we trying to sort of, you know, explain and convey here. So it's far easier for me to kind of look at a diagram. Within a few seconds I can kind of see where things are going, what the decision points are, and if a further piece of documentation is required, rather than going off to another system to search for that documentation, why not make my life easy and give me a one-click function to connect to that document. Okay, that pretty much brings us to the end of this 30-minute taster. So hopefully you like what you know, we have to offer and some of the functions that have been shown today. My colleague Dominica, who's arranged these sessions, will make a follow-up with you next week, and obviously if you've got any more questions, and again obviously she'll facilitate those, and obviously we'll come back to you. So thank you very much for your time either this afternoon, or for those joining in the US, your time this morning, and have a good rest of the day and a good weekend. Thank you and goodbye.